Mark lived in a small town outside Bend, Oregon, the kind of place where people waved at each other in parking lots and nobody was surprised to see a man with mud on his boots at the grocery store. He was 41, divorced, and renting a one-bedroom apartment over a dentist's office that smelled faintly of mint even late at night. His job as a maintenance tech at a lumber mill paid the bills when nothing broke down at home. Lately, things had been breaking a lot. The hunting trip was not about deer. It was about quiet. About not hearing his phone buzz with reminders he could not fix yet. About not seeing his ex-wife's name pop up in group texts about their daughter's school schedule. He loved his daughter, Emily, more than anything. That love came with a constant low-level fear he never talked about. Fear of falling behind. Fear of being the parent who always said maybe next month. The forest was familiar to him in the way only something you grew up around could be. The trailhead was 30 minutes from town, past a stretch of highway where cell service dropped without warning. He liked that part. No podcasts, no news, just the sound of tires on gravel. He parked his old Tacoma near a clearing and stepped out, breathing in cold air that felt clean in his chest. He had been walking for about an hour when he noticed the trees thinning in a way that did not feel natural. The ground dipped slightly, and there it was. A helicopter, half swallowed by moss and pine needles, its tail bent at an awkward angle. It looked like it had been sitting there for years. Maybe decades. Mark stood there longer than he meant to, trying to place it. He hunted these woods every season. He did not remember this. His first thought was that someone would want to know. His second thought was that someone probably already did. He circled it slowly, boots crunching on old branches. No blood. No signs of a crash that screamed disaster. Just time. Time and neglect. Mark was not the kind of guy who chased mystery. He fixed what was in front of him and tried not to think too far ahead. But something about the helicopter pulled at him. Maybe it was the way it sat there quietly, like it had been waiting. Maybe it was that his own life felt paused in a similar way. He climbed onto the skid and leaned into the open door. Inside was stripped down, seats torn, wires exposed. No dramatic discovery. Just emptiness. Then he saw the bag on the floor. A simple canvas duffel, faded blue, tucked under what used to be a passenger seat. His chest tightened. He told himself to leave it. He did not. He reached in and pulled it closer. Inside were notebooks. 3 of them. A handheld recorder with dead batteries. And a folded piece of paper on top, edges soft from moisture. Mark unfolded it carefully. It was a letter, handwritten, dated 12 years earlier. The name at the bottom was not familiar. He sat down on a fallen log just outside the helicopter and read it once. Then again. The letter was not dramatic. It was quiet. The writer talked about flying supplies to remote areas. About being tired. About missing birthdays. About the fear of becoming invisible to the people you love when you are gone too much. It ended with a line that stuck with Mark in a way he did not expect. If something happens to me, please remember I tried to do good. Mark swallowed hard. This was not evidence. This was a life paused mid-sentence. He felt like he was reading something he was not meant to see, but also like it had been left there on purpose. His phone buzzed again. This time he looked. A message from Emily. A picture of a drawing she made in class. A stick figure family, uneven but smiling. He stared at the screen, then back at the helicopter. The woods were still. No birds. No wind. He thought about how easy it was for a person to disappear without anyone really noticing right away. How many nights he felt invisible in his own apartment, eating dinner alone in front of the TV, telling himself he would figure things out soon. Mark packed the notebooks back into the bag and stood up. He did not know what he was supposed to do next. He only knew he could not leave it like this. Not anymore. As he walked back toward his truck, the weight of the duffel on his shoulder felt heavier than it should have. Not because of what was inside, but because of what it reminded him of. that lives did not stop being important just because time moved on. When he reached the clearing, he paused and looked back once. The helicopter was already blending into the forest again, quiet and patient. Mark felt something shift in him. Not hope exactly. More like responsibility. He did not know who the letter belonged to, or if anyone was still waiting. But for the first time in a long while, he felt pulled toward something outside his own worries. And that mattered. Mark did not go straight home after leaving the forest. He drove into town with the duffel bag on the passenger seat, like it might slide off if he took a corner too fast. The radio stayed off. He kept replaying the letter in his head, the careful handwriting, the way the sentences sounded like someone thinking out loud instead of trying to impress anyone. He stopped at a small coffee shop near the courthouse, the kind with scratched wooden tables and mismatched mugs. It was late morning, quiet except for an older man reading the paper and a woman typing on a laptop near the window. Mark ordered a drip coffee and sat in the corner, placing the bag at his feet. He told himself he would just warm up, then head to the sheriff's office and report what he found. That was the responsible thing. Still, he did not move. He pulled one of the notebooks out and opened it. The pages were filled with dated entries. Short ones mostly. Notes about weather conditions, flight paths, fuel concerns. In between were personal thoughts, scribbled in the margins. Missing my son's game again. Need to call mom. I hope this job is worth it. The handwriting changed slightly over time, less neat near the end, like the writer had been tired. Mark felt an uncomfortable familiarity. He had journals like this too, abandoned in drawers. Half plans, half confessions to no one. He closed the notebook and rubbed his face with both hands. That was when the woman from the window table stood up. She hesitated, then walked over. Sorry, she said quietly. I don't mean to pry, but you look like you just found out something heavy. Mark blinked, surprised. He almost said he was fine out of habit. Instead, something else came out. Yeah, he said. I think I did. She gestured to the empty chair. Mind if I sit for a second? He shrugged. Sure. Her name was Lisa. She worked as a freelance court reporter, waiting on a delayed hearing. She talked the way people do when they spend their lives listening more than speaking. Calm. Direct. Mark found himself telling her about the helicopter before he realized he had started. Not every detail. Just enough. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she nodded slowly. Sounds like someone didn't want to be forgotten. That's what it feels like, Mark said. But I don't know why I'm the one who found it. Or why it's bothering me this much. Lisa smiled faintly. Sometimes things hit us because they line up with something we're already carrying. He stared into his coffee. I'm not exactly in a great place, he admitted. Divorced. Bills stacking up. Trying to be a good dad without feeling like I'm always behind. She looked at him with understanding, not pity. Most people I meet in court aren't there because of one bad choice. It's usually a lot of small ones mixed with bad luck and silence. That word stuck with him. Silence. Lisa asked if he planned to turn the bag in. He said yes. He said it like he was convincing himself. She nodded again. You should. But maybe before that, see if there's a name or a contact. Someone might still be looking. Back in his truck, Mark felt a strange resistance. Part of him wanted to hand everything over and wash his hands of it. Another part wanted to know who this person was. Not out of curiosity, but respect. That afternoon, instead of going home, he stopped by the public library. It was a modern building with big glass windows and a children's section that reminded him of Saturdays with Emily. He sat at a computer and searched the name from the letter along with helicopter crash records in the area. It took longer than he expected. Then he found it. A short local news article from 12 years ago. A helicopter went missing during a supply run. Presumed mechanical failure. Pilot never recovered. The case went cold. The pilot had a name. A photo. He looked ordinary. Tired eyes. Slight smile. A man you might pass in a grocery store without noticing. There was a mention of family. A sister. A son. Mark leaned back in the chair, heart beating faster. He was not sure what he felt. Sadness, yes. But also something else. A pull. Like this story was not finished, even if the official records said it was. That evening, Mark picked up Emily from school. She climbed into the truck and immediately started talking about her day. He listened, really listened, more than usual. At a stoplight, she asked why he looked serious. I found something today, he said carefully. Something that reminded me how important it is to show up. She considered that. Did it make you sad? A little, he said. But also, clearer. At home later, after Emily went to bed, Mark laid the notebooks out on the kitchen table. His apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. He picked up the phone and hovered his thumb over the sheriff's office number. Then he stopped. He opened the notebook again and flipped to the last page. There was an address scribbled there. Not a current one, maybe. But a start. Mark knew this was the moment people usually avoided. The moment where helping someone else meant stepping out of your own routine. He felt tired just thinking about it. But he also felt awake in a way he had not in months. He did not call the sheriff that night. Instead, he wrote the address down and placed it next to his keys. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow he would start doing the right thing, even if it was uncomfortable. As he turned off the lights, Mark realized something quietly unsettling and hopeful at the same time. Finding that helicopter did not fix his life. It did not solve his problems. But it cracked something open. It reminded him that being present, even when it is hard, still matters. And sometimes, the smallest decision to not look away is where change actually begins. The address stayed on Mark's kitchen counter longer than he expected. 2 days passed. Then 3. Every morning he saw it while making toast, the ink slightly smudged where his thumb had pressed too hard. Every night he told himself he would deal with it tomorrow. Work was busy. Emily had a school project. His truck needed a new tire. Life kept offering him small, reasonable excuses. But the truth was simpler and harder to admit. He was afraid. On Thursday night, after Emily fell asleep on the couch with a half-finished movie playing, Mark sat there staring at the dark TV screen. The apartment felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that leaves room for thoughts you usually drown out with noise. He picked up the notebooks again, flipping through pages he had already read twice. One entry caught his attention this time. It was short. I keep thinking if I disappear, things will just keep moving without me. Maybe that's easier for everyone. Mark closed the notebook quickly, like it had burned him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands pressed together. That sentence felt too close. Too familiar. He had never thought about disappearing in any serious way, but he had definitely imagined what it would be like if people needed him less. If the pressure eased. If expectations dropped. He hated that part of himself. The next morning, Mark finally drove to the address. It was in a neighboring town, about 40 minutes away. The neighborhood was quiet and ordinary. Single-story homes. Faded mailboxes. A couple of cars parked unevenly along the curb. He sat in his truck for a long time, engine off, staring at the house number. What if no one lived there anymore? What if whoever answered the door didn't want to know? What if this made things worse instead of better? He thought about Emily. About how angry he would be if someone knew something important about her and decided it was easier to stay quiet. Mark got out of the truck. A woman answered the door after the second knock. She was in her late 50s maybe, hair pulled back, wearing a sweatshirt with a local high school logo. She looked tired but alert, like someone used to handling things. Yes, she said cautiously. Mark cleared his throat. I'm sorry to bother you. My name's Mark. I found something that I think might be connected to your brother. Her face changed in a way that made his chest tighten. Not shock. Not anger. Just a kind of stillness. She didn't invite him in right away. She asked what he found. He told her. Slowly. Carefully. When he mentioned the helicopter, she closed her eyes for a second and pressed her lips together. I'm Karen, she said. You better come in. They sat at a small dining table cluttered with mail and a half-finished puzzle. Mark placed the notebooks and the letter in front of her. She touched the cover like it might disappear if she didn't. He kept journals, she said quietly. Even as a kid. She read the letter without speaking. When she finished, she folded it back along the same creases and held it in both hands. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. I always wondered, she said. Not about what happened. About whether he felt like any of it mattered. Mark didn't know what to say. So he didn't try to fix it. He just listened. Karen told him about her nephew. The pilot's son. How he grew up believing his dad chose work over family. How resentment filled the empty space where answers should have been. How they stopped talking years ago. He thinks his father didn't care enough to come home, she said. I never knew how to explain it. Mark felt a pressure build behind his eyes. He thought about the nights Emily asked why he couldn't stay longer. About the times he said soon and hoped it was true. I think he did care, Mark said. A lot. Karen nodded slowly. Would you be willing to talk to my nephew? Just tell him how you found this. Why you brought it here. The question landed heavier than he expected. This wasn't just about returning lost items anymore. This meant stepping into someone else's pain. Being seen. Being involved. I don't know if I'm the right person, Mark said honestly. Karen met his eyes. Neither was my brother, most of the time. But he tried. That night, driving home, Mark felt raw. Exposed. Like something essential had been stripped away. He parked in front of his apartment and didn't get out right away. His phone buzzed. A voicemail notification. From an unknown number. He listened. It was his ex-wife. Her voice was calm but firm. She needed to talk about changing weekends. Emily had been asking questions. About why things felt tense lately. Mark closed his eyes and rested his forehead against the steering wheel. This was it. The convergence he had been avoiding. The realization that avoiding discomfort was slowly costing him more than facing it ever could. Inside the apartment, he sat at the table where the notebooks had been days earlier. The space felt emptier now, but also clearer. He took out a piece of paper and started writing. Not a plan. Not a solution. Just the truth. That he was scared of failing. That he was tired of feeling replaceable. That he didn't want to wake up one day and realize he had let silence do the talking for him. Mark knew this was the breaking point not because everything was falling apart, but because he could finally see where it had been cracking all along. And for the first time, instead of stepping back, he leaned into it. Mark met Karen's nephew on a Sunday afternoon at a diner just off the highway. It was the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and laminated menus that hadn't changed in years. The nephew's name was Alex. He was in his late 20s, wore a plain hoodie, and looked like someone who had learned how to keep his expectations low. They shook hands awkwardly. Neither of them knew how to start. Mark ordered coffee he didn't really want. Alex ordered nothing. I don't know what you're supposed to say in a situation like this, Alex finally said, staring at the table. My aunt says you found something. Mark nodded. I did. I wasn't looking for it. I just came across it. He didn't dramatize the story. He talked about the woods, the quiet, the bag on the floor. He talked about the notebooks and the letter. He slid copies across the table. Alex hesitated before touching them, like they might confirm something he'd spent years trying to avoid. Alex read silently. His jaw tightened. He stopped halfway through and leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. He always said work was work, Alex said. That it was just something he had to do. Mark chose his words carefully. In the notebooks, he wrote about you. Not in big speeches. Just missing things. Wondering if you'd understand someday. Alex swallowed. I used to think if he cared more, he would have come home sooner. Mark nodded. I think a lot of parents get stuck thinking providing is the same thing as being present. Sometimes they don't realize the difference until it's too late. Alex was quiet for a long time. Then he let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for years. I don't know what to do with this, he said. You don't have to do anything, Mark replied. You don't have to forgive him. Or rewrite the past. You just get more of the truth now. When they stood to leave, Alex surprised Mark by offering a brief hug. It was stiff, uncertain, but real. Thanks for not keeping it to yourself, Alex said. That would have been easier. On the drive home, Mark felt lighter and heavier at the same time. He hadn't fixed anyone. He hadn't closed every wound. But something important had been handed back to where it belonged. That evening, Mark called his ex-wife. They didn't solve everything in one conversation. They talked about schedules, about Emily's questions, about how tired they both were of dancing around hard topics. Mark admitted he'd been distant. Not angry. Just overwhelmed. I don't want Emily growing up thinking silence is normal, he said. Even when it's uncomfortable. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, I've been waiting a long time to hear that. The next week, Mark took a day off work and went to Emily's school presentation. He stood in the back of the classroom, hands shoved into his pockets, watching her scan the room until she spotted him. Her face lit up in a way that made his chest ache. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was simple. Later at home, they sat on the couch eating takeout. Emily leaned against him, half watching a show, half talking about nothing in particular. Mark listened. Really listened. He realized that being present wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up again and again, even when you felt behind. Weeks passed. The helicopter was officially documented. The forest reclaimed its quiet. Life did not suddenly become easier. Bills still came. Work was still work. Some nights, Mark still felt that old weight pressing down. But something had changed. He started saying things out loud instead of holding them in. When he was tired, he admitted it. When he was scared, he named it. When he messed up, he owned it. Not perfectly. Just honestly. One night, as he put Emily to bed, she asked, Dad, are you okay lately? He thought about it. I think I'm getting there, he said. She nodded, satisfied with that answer. Later, alone in the apartment, Mark stood by the window and looked out at the streetlights. He thought about the man in the helicopter. About how easy it was to believe your efforts disappear if no one sees them. About how wrong that belief could be. Life didn't give Mark a clean ending. It gave him something quieter and more useful. A sense that even small acts of courage mattered. That listening mattered. That choosing not to look away could ripple farther than you'd ever know. As he turned off the light, Mark felt a steady thought settle in, one he hoped would stay with him. You don't have to be perfect to be present. You just have to keep showing up. And maybe that was enough.